Climate justice is more than an environmental issue. It's a matter of human rights, freedoms, and accountability. And today I have the honor to have Dr. Aliozi, who is a climate justice expert, a human rights educator, and activist. Thank you for accepting this interview, and welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a privilege to be given the opportunity to talk about climate justice and hopefully raise awareness about this new field that is so important in our world today.
So, firstly, I'd like to know what are the main issues that climate justice faces and how they might be solved.
So, we need maybe a month to, do fairness to this topic because it's so important, and there are so many issues that would be useful for our audience to learn. But let's say that today we live in a world that is under a climate emergency. So there is a climate crisis that is happening in our planet. This has been recognized by the United Nations. It has been recognized by almost every country around the world. So it's a matter of extra urgency that we need all to pay attention to and do something to help solve all these issues, this climate crisis. Because why? We all live on this planet. It's our shared home. And no matter where we come from or from whichever country we come from, borders doesn't really matter in environmental pollution, right? So we have a common interest, a shared interest and duty to do something to solve these issues that climate crisis is creating. The most important issues is the problems with environmental harms, with environmental damages, with the destruction of ecosystems, which also means that species are being extinct. We're talking about places and locations around the world that you can no longer live. There are issues and cases for the small island, Pacific islands, that they go underwater. So whole islands go underwater. It's not something for the future. It's not science fiction anymore. It's happening right now. The most serious issues and problems is the lack of political will. So we know that everyone should act. We know that everyone has a role to play in taking climate action to solve these problems for the protection of all humankind. And I should add, for the protection of animals, for the protection of nature itself. We don't really need to justify why we need to protect nature, because we live in this nature and it's to our best interest to actually make sure we protect it. So the most important problems and let's say obstacles in realizing climate justice is the lack of political will. So we're asking from our governments and politicians to take action, and because there are not in existence still today, there are not strong legal obligations that makes them, take urgent action, we see slow climate action. So we see that they don't really take strong steps to protect the environment. This is why we're still witnessing around the world the continuity of environmental harm and damages.
71% of global greenhouse gas emissions are produced by corporations. Should corporations bear greater legal accountability than governments for environmental damage?
You are raising a very important issue. So it's true that the worst polluters are corporations, so private companies. It's not only the governments that we are looking for accountability. There are other stakeholders, let's say, in this case. So, as a climate justice expert and advocate, yes, I'm saying that we need to make sure that corporations are held accountable, that they are obligated to take urgent action to lower their emissions and make sure that they implement sustainability strategies in their practices and in the work they do. Because these are the major polluters. These are the ones that, like you said, 71% of global emissions come from activities that corporations take. So we need to find ways to hold these people and corporations accountable.
Is it realistically possible to enforce an international legal mechanism for industrialized nations to compensate vulnerable regions for climate damage?
So this is a very complex issue and it's very difficult to really put it in practice, but I'm optimistic that positive steps have been taken towards that direction. So In the recent COPs, I think it was COP 27, and it was advanced more in COP 28. COPs are the conferences of the parties. So are these, let's say, meetings of international leaders. So all countries come together to discuss issues of the environment, the conference of the parties. So in the COP27, they have created this initiative called Loss and Damage Fund. So it is based on this idea that the most, the ones that profited more by the Industrial Revolution, and they have contributed more in climate change by emitting, by destroying the environment, by treating nature as an endless bank of resources for their practices. So these people, or governments, or countries, or corporations that gain the most profit by destroying the environment and have contributed more to climate change in that way, these are the ones that should pay compensation to the most vulnerable states or peoples, and to the ones that are least responsible for this climate crisis. So I'm optimistic that we are going towards that direction, and there have been initiatives to make sure that what we call in climate justice historical responsibility. So some countries or groups of people have historical responsibility for the climate crisis. The most developed countries, like the global north, the very rich, these developed countries, they have profited by exploiting nature. With the industrialization, for example, of commerce and all that. So all this should be addressed. Justice is all about looking who was harmed, especially climate justice. We look at three main questions, very simply for our audience as well. Who is harmed by the climate crisis? Who benefits by the anthropogenic, by the human-made, let's say, harm? And the third question, what the law prescribes in this case? So who has responsibility? How we can use law to hold the responsible accountable in a court of law? So I'm trying to be optimistic. I really believe in this new field that we call climate justice, because it's a really ideal body of law that we are putting into place and that we are creating. It's a transformational, force for justice, for global justice. So I'm optimistic that it's just a matter of time for all these tools to be developed and to put in practice, with the ultimate goal for justice to be served. That is in the best interest of all, that justice is served.
Talk a bit about ecocide. What is this, and what are the legal challenges that prevent ecocide from being globally recognized as a crime?
That is a very important question, and thank you for asking me this question. Ecocide is a law that is currently being developed in order to save our planet. So it's a very important law. It is the idea that mass destruction of the environment by humans, because in a crime you always need the role of the wrongdoer to be human, anthropogenic, like we say, human-made. So the mass destruction of the environment can now become a crime, and someone can be held accountable in a court of law. So we're talking about huge and large-scale mass damages of the environment that can be, punished and prosecuted by law. It's mirroring the international crime of genocide. So we know that the largest court in the world, the International Criminal Court, the ICC, has some crimes as the worst crimes against humanity. It has genocide, war crimes, and we want to include a fifth crime in its mandate. So we want the largest court in the world treating criminal, activities, to also include ecocide. So to also make sure that the damages against the environment and against nature are being, protected somehow, and people or perpetrators are being, held accountable. So it's a very important development in law, in international law, which will also be included in national laws eventually. And there is a huge movement that is supporting this creation of this new law. There are groups of activists. There is the Stop Ecocide Foundation that created this legal definition. So there are many stakeholders trying to make sure to push this new creation of law, this new development of law, at the end of the day, to protect our environment, to protect our planet, our home. Ecocide, by definition, if you break etymologically the word, means eco, which comes from ancient Greek, it means home, side, which comes from Latin, it means to kill. So ecocide means to kill our home. We're talking about something that by definition is so important. It should be already, implemented in international law, but these processes take time, and we are in a positive, path for the legalization and implementation of this crime by international law. So it's very important.
New trends in climate justice promote the idea of giving legal personality to elements of nature, such as oceans, seas, trees, and so on. At the level of mechanism, how does this work, and how will it be possible to represent them in courts?
This is also a new, development in international law and in national laws, and it's also, again, due to the climate justice movement that we see these new ideas and new concepts that are being developed in law. So there are so many issues that we can talk about that. In reality, to appear in court, you have to have a voice, let's simplify it. Yes? So a human can go to demand her rights in a court of law. When we say, for example, that nature has rights, it's difficult to really say how will this in practice be implemented. But it is a reality. We need to find ways to improve and to evolve laws in order to include, this possibility for nature to be protected by having courts making sure and ensuring this protection. So there is this movement for the rights of nature all around the world. There are countries around the world that have already done it. For example, in New Zealand, they have given the rights to a river because it's very important to the Maori people. So this river has rights now. And how does this happen in practice is that usually some guardians are appointed to speak for this river. Maybe indigenous groups or people from this area that have a direct interest in protecting this river. So there are ways. The same happens, for example, for years with children. Children cannot really appear in court, so we appoint guardians. The same should happen to the rights of animals. Animals cannot really speak in a court, but we need to protect them. And the legal justice systems that we have are being made of court hearings, of submitting applications, or going to a court to hear your case and find justice. So we have to find ways to use the same tools we have, but evolve them in a way to include ideas like the rights of nature, the rights of animals, and these new developing concepts that, again, I should highlight, are because of climate justice that we have gained, value, and they seem possible to have. So, yes.
Another controversial topic is the balance between economic growth and environmental protection. When legal decisions conflict between immediate economic growth and long-term sustainability, whose rights take priority?
Big discussion, and there are arguments that make sense in both, let's say, sides. But from a climate justice perspective, because that's what I'm talking about here today, it is sustainability that should take precedent. It is the rights of future generations, for example, that should take precedent. Not profit, not short-term economic interests, but long-term sustainability practices, and also to think of what will happen to the rights of future generations as well. So this dilemma between the right to development and using unsustainable methods to make profit, I don't think is really a dilemma. It's just another way to blur the discussion. I think it is very clear that it's in the best interest of all to make sure that we protect our planet, that we protect our environment, and not thinking in short-term economical interest, state of mind. But how we should look at long-term sustainability methods and to ensure that the rights of future generations as well are protected.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zoe, for this interview.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
It was a pleasure for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you.